The morning sun painted the Pacific Ocean in shades of gold and orange as Coast Guard cutter Sentinel cut through the calm waters off the California coast. Lieutenant Sarah Martinez stood on the bridge, her experienced eyes scanning the horizon through binoculars. At 32, she had seen her share of maritime adventures, but something about this particular morning felt different. "Contact bearing 270, approximately 3 miles out," called Petty Officer James Chen from the radar station. His voice carried the routine professionalism of someone who had made countless similar reports, but there was an undertone of curiosity that caught Martinez's attention. She swung her binoculars toward the indicated bearing and focused on a sleek white yacht cutting an unusual path through the shipping lanes. The vessel appeared to be a luxury craft, probably 60 feet in length, with clean lines that spoke of serious money. What struck her as odd wasn't the boat itself, but its erratic course pattern. "That's strange," she murmured, lowering the binoculars. "Chen, plot that vessel's course over the last 10 minutes. The petty officer's fingers danced across his console, pulling up the tracking data. "Ma'am, the vessel has been making irregular turns, almost like they're trying to avoid something. Speed varies between 8 and 15 knots. Martinez felt her instincts kick in. In her 8 years with the Coast Guard, she had learned to trust those gut feelings that separated routine patrols from potentially significant encounters. Boats didn't just wander aimlessly through shipping lanes without reason, especially not expensive yachts that should have sophisticated navigation equipment. "All stop," she ordered. "Prepare the rigid inflatable boat. We're going to conduct a safety inspection." Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez, a weathered veteran with 20 years of service, approached the bridge. His salt and pepper beard framed a face that had seen everything the ocean could throw at sailors. "Something not right about that yacht, Lieutenant?" "Maybe nothing, Chief, but they're acting like they're lost or avoiding something. Could be mechanical trouble. Could be worse." Martinez handed him the binoculars. "Take a look and tell me what you think." Rodriguez studied the distant yacht for several minutes, his expression growing more serious. "That's a Sunseeker Predator, probably worth close to $2 million. Boats like that don't get lost, and they sure don't wander around shipping lanes unless something's wrong." The Coast Guard vessel's engines rumbled to a stop as the crew prepared for what they assumed would be a routine inspection. Martinez had conducted hundreds of these over her career, checking for proper safety equipment, valid documentation, and ensuring vessels weren't in distress. Most encounters were straightforward affairs involving weekend boaters or fishing crews who welcomed the interaction. As the rigid inflatable boat was lowered into the water, Martinez reviewed the standard procedures in her mind. Approach with caution, but maintain a professional demeanor. Check for signs of distress or illegal activity. Verify the vessel's documentation and ensure compliance with maritime safety regulations. Simple, routine, professional. She climbed down into the smaller boat along with Chief Rodriguez and 2 other crew members, Seaman Johnson and Petty Officer Williams. The inflatable boat's powerful outboard motor roared to life, sending spray across the surface as they headed toward the mysterious yacht. As they approached, details became clearer. The yacht was indeed a high-end vessel, its white hull gleaming in the morning sun. But something seemed off about the scene. No one was visible on deck, which was unusual for a boat underway. Most pleasure craft would have at least one person visible, enjoying the beautiful morning or monitoring their course. "Ahoy there!" Rodriguez called out through the boat's loudspeaker as they pulled alongside. "United States Coast Guard, request permission to come aboard for a safety inspection." For a long moment, nothing happened. The yacht continued its slow forward motion, engines purring quietly. Then a figure emerged from the cabin area, moving slowly toward the stern where the Coast Guard team waited. The man appeared to be in his 60s, with silver hair and an expensive polo shirt that matched the yacht's upscale appearance. But something in his posture suggested tension, maybe even fear. His movements were careful, almost hesitant, as if he was considering his options. "Good morning, officers." the man called down, his voice carrying a slight accent that Martinez couldn't immediately place. "Is there a problem?" "Routine safety inspection, sir," Martinez replied, maintaining her professional tone. "We noticed some unusual navigation patterns and wanted to ensure everything was okay. May we come aboard?" The man hesitated again, glancing back toward the yacht's cabin. That hesitation sent up another red flag in Martinez's mind. In her experience, innocent boaters were usually eager to cooperate, especially when they understood it was about safety rather than enforcement. "Of course," the man finally replied, though his enthusiasm seemed forced. "Please come aboard. I was just having some navigation trouble." As Martinez and Rodriguez climbed aboard the yacht, they immediately noticed the contrast between the vessel's immaculate exterior and the subtle signs of distress they were trained to recognize. The man's hands shook slightly, and his eyes kept darting toward the cabin entrance as if expecting someone or something to emerge. "Beautiful boat," Rodriguez commented, running his hand along the polished rail. "You're the owner?" "Yes, well, sort of," the man replied vaguely. "It's complicated." That phrase sent up yet another warning sign. Boat ownership was rarely complicated unless something illegal was involved. Martinez made a mental note to check the vessel's registration thoroughly. "Could we see your documentation, sir?" she asked. "Registration, safety equipment, that sort of thing?" The man nodded quickly, perhaps too quickly. "Certainly, certainly. Everything's in order, I assure you. Let me just—" He started toward the cabin, then stopped. "Actually, would you mind if we handled this out here on deck? It's such a beautiful morning." Now Martinez was certain something wasn't right. Boat documentation was typically kept in the cabin or bridge area, easily accessible and organized. No one preferred to handle paperwork on deck unless they had reason to avoid letting authorities inside their vessel. "Sir, I'm going to need to see the boat's registration and your identification," she said firmly. "And we'll need to conduct a basic safety inspection of the vessel. It's standard procedure." The man's face went pale, and for a moment, Martinez thought he might refuse. Instead, he took a deep breath and said something that would change everything about their routine morning patrol. "Before you do that," he said quietly, "I think you should know who I am." The words hung in the air between them like a challenge. Martinez felt her hand instinctively move closer to her radio, while Chief Rodriguez shifted his weight, ready for whatever might come next. In their line of work, when someone felt compelled to reveal their identity before cooperating with authorities, it usually meant trouble. "I'm listening," Martinez replied, her voice steady despite the growing tension. The man reached slowly into his pocket, his movements deliberate and careful. "My name is Victor Kozlov," he said, producing a worn passport. "Perhaps you've heard of me." The name hit Martinez like a physical blow. Victor Kozlov wasn't just any name. It was a name that had appeared in intelligence briefings, Coast Guard alerts, and international law enforcement bulletins for the past 5 years. Kozlov was a former Russian intelligence officer turned arms dealer, suspected of facilitating weapons sales to various criminal organizations and hostile nations. Rodriguez's eyes widened almost imperceptibly. He had clearly recognized the name as well, though he maintained his professional composure. Both Coast Guard officers suddenly understood they were no longer dealing with a routine safety inspection. "Mr. Kozlov," Martinez said carefully, "you understand that your presence in U.S. waters raises certain concerns." Kozlov laughed bitterly, running his hands through his silver hair. "Lieutenant, I suspect my presence anywhere raises concerns. But you don't understand the situation here. I'm not the threat you should be worried about." Before Martinez could respond, the sound of approaching engines caught everyone's attention. 3 black speedboats were racing toward them from different directions, moving fast and with obvious intent. These weren't pleasure craft or fishing boats. They moved with military precision and purpose. "Those boats," Kozlov said urgently, "they've been following me for 3 days. I've been trying to reach U.S. authorities, trying to get protection, but they keep finding me." Martinez immediately activated her radio. "Sentinel, this is Martinez. We have 3 unknown vessels approaching our position at high speed. Request immediate backup and prepare for possible hostile contact." The response crackled back instantly. "Copy that, Martinez. Backup en route. Maintain your position and assess the situation." The speedboats were closing fast, and as they drew nearer, details became visible that made Martinez's blood run cold. Each boat carried multiple passengers, and she could see the distinctive shapes of weapons being prepared. These weren't law enforcement officers or casual boaters. They were clearly hostile forces. "Lieutenant," Kozlov said, his earlier nervousness replaced by grim determination, "I have information that your government desperately needs. 3 months ago, I learned about a plan to smuggle nuclear materials through your ports. I tried to contact the FBI, the CIA, but my former colleagues discovered my intentions." The first speedboat was now close enough for Martinez to see the faces of its occupants. Hard men with the look of professional killers. All of them focused on the yacht with deadly intent. She could see assault rifles being readied, their barrels glinting in the morning sun. "These men work for my former handler, Colonel Dmitry Volkov," Kozlov continued rapidly. "They have orders to eliminate me before I can share what I know about the nuclear materials. The shipment is scheduled to arrive in Los Angeles in 48 hours. Rodriguez had already moved to the yacht's radio, attempting to contact the Coast Guard cutter directly. "Sentinel, Sentinel, this is Rodriguez. We have confirmed hostile vessels approaching. Armed personnel visible. Request immediate assistance and prepare for engagement." The response was swift and reassuring. "Rodriguez, backup is 3 minutes out. Helicopter support en route. Maintain defensive positions." But 3 minutes might as well have been 3 hours. The speedboats were now close enough that Martinez could hear their occupants shouting in what sounded like Russian. She could see weapons being aimed in their direction. "Everyone get down!" she shouted, just as the first burst of gunfire erupted across the water. The bullets struck the yacht's hull with sharp metallic pings, sending splinters of fiberglass flying. Martinez and her team dove for cover behind the yacht's superstructure, while Kozlov pressed himself flat against the deck. "They're not trying to sink us," Kozlov called out over the sound of gunfire. "They need me alive to find out what I've told American authorities, but they'll kill anyone else without hesitation." Another burst of gunfire raked the yacht's upper deck, shattering windows and sending glass cascading onto the deck. Martinez could hear the speedboat engines growing louder as they closed in for boarding action. Rodriguez had managed to retrieve his sidearm and was assessing their tactical situation. "Lieutenant, we've got maybe 30 seconds before they're alongside. 3 boats? Probably 12 to 15 hostiles total. We're seriously outgunned." Martinez's mind raced through their options. They were Coast Guard officers, not Navy SEALs. Their training focused on maritime law enforcement and rescue operations, not combat against professional killers. But they had a duty to protect Kozlov and the information he carried, especially if it really concerned nuclear materials entering American ports. "Kozlov," she called, "this information about nuclear materials, how specific is it?" "Container ship Svetlana, arriving Los Angeles tomorrow night," he replied without hesitation. "The materials are hidden in a shipment of agricultural equipment. Enough enriched uranium to build 3 dirty bombs." The weight of his words hit her like a sledgehammer. If Kozlov was telling the truth, and if these hostile forces succeeded in killing him, a nuclear threat might slip into one of America's busiest ports undetected. The sound of approaching helicopter rotors began to mix with the noise of gunfire and speedboat engines. Help was coming, but the situation was deteriorating rapidly. One of the speedboats had maneuvered alongside the yacht's port side, and Martinez could see armed men preparing to board. "Everyone stay low," Rodriguez commanded, raising his weapon. "We hold this position until backup arrives." The first hostile operative swung over the yacht's railing, assault rifle in hand, scanning for targets. Rodriguez didn't hesitate. His service pistol barked once, and the man tumbled backward into the water. But more were coming. And the sound of grappling hooks scraping against the yacht's hull indicated multiple boarding attempts. Martinez grabbed Kozlov by the shoulder. "Listen to me carefully. If something happens to us, you get to that helicopter when it arrives. You make sure American authorities get that information about the nuclear shipment." Kozlov nodded grimly. "Lieutenant, there's something else. The colonel who ordered my assassination. He has contacts inside your government. People who are supposed to protect your ports have been compromised." The implications of his words were staggering, but there was no time to process them fully. More gunfire erupted as Rodriguez engaged additional boarders, and Martinez could see that their defensive position was being overwhelmed. Then, like salvation from above, the distinctive sound of Coast Guard helicopter rotors grew louder, accompanied by a voice over their radio. "This is Coast Guard Air Rescue 7. We have visual on your position. Taking evasive action." The helicopter swept in low, its door gunner opening fire on the speedboats with devastating effect. The hostile forces, suddenly finding themselves under attack from above, began to scatter. One speedboat attempted to flee, but not before launching a final desperate assault on the yacht. As the battle raged around them, Martinez realized this was no longer a routine patrol that had gone wrong. They had stumbled into the middle of an international conspiracy involving nuclear terrorism and government corruption. And somehow, the fate of thousands of innocent Americans now rested in the hands of a small Coast Guard boarding party and a Russian defector who had chosen the most dangerous way possible to become a whistleblower. The yacht shuddered under the impact of more gunfire, and Martinez knew that whatever happened in the next few minutes would determine not just their survival, but possibly the security of the entire West Coast. The Coast Guard helicopter's intervention changed everything. Within minutes, 2 of the speedboats were disabled, their crews either captured or forced to surrender. The third boat managed to escape into the morning haze, but not before the helicopter crew had captured clear images of its occupants and registration numbers. As smoke cleared from the damaged yacht, Martinez found herself looking at a scene that would have been unthinkable when she started her patrol that morning. Bodies of hostile operatives floated in the water, while others sat under armed guard on the yacht's deck. Chief Rodriguez was applying first aid to a wounded crew member, and Victor Kozlov sat against the cabin wall, holding a blood-soaked cloth to a graze on his arm. "Lieutenant Martinez," the helicopter pilot's voice crackled over the radio. "We've got federal agencies en route, FBI, Homeland Security, and some people who didn't identify themselves. You're to maintain position and secure the scene until they arrive." Martinez surveyed the chaos around her and realized they were at the center of something much larger than a simple arms dealer trying to defect. The precision of the attack, the resources involved, and most importantly, Kozlov's claims about nuclear materials and government corruption suggested they had uncovered a plot that reached into the highest levels of national security. "Mr. Kozlov," she said, approaching the wounded Russian, "we need to get you medical attention, but first, I need to know everything about this nuclear shipment. If what you're saying is true, we have less than 24 hours to prevent a catastrophe." Kozlov winced as he adjusted his position. "The ship is the Svetlana, registered in Panama, but controlled by a shell company with ties to my former organization. The uranium is concealed inside agricultural machinery being shipped to a warehouse in Long Beach. But, Lieutenant, the cargo isn't the worst part." "What do you mean?" "The men who attacked us today, they weren't just trying to kill me. They were buying time. While we've been fighting here, other teams are probably moving to intercept the shipment and relocate it before your authorities can respond to my information." The implications hit Martinez like a cold wave. If Kozlov was correct, their battle on the yacht might have been a deliberate distraction, designed to keep him busy while his former colleague secured the nuclear materials he was trying to expose. Before she could respond, the sound of additional helicopters filled the air. These weren't Coast Guard aircraft. They moved with the purposeful efficiency of federal law enforcement. Within minutes, the yacht was surrounded by a small fleet of government vessels, and serious-looking agents in tactical gear were fast roping onto the deck. A woman in her 40s with steel-gray hair and the bearing of someone accustomed to command approached Martinez. "Lieutenant, I'm Special Agent Sarah Thompson, FBI Counterterrorism Division. We're taking custody of this scene and Mr. Kozlov." But as Thompson spoke, Martinez noticed something that made her blood run cold. One of the agents standing behind Thompson bore a striking resemblance to one of the men she had seen in the speedboats before the shooting started. The same angular face, the same cold eyes, though now wearing an FBI tactical vest instead of civilian clothes. "Agent Thompson," Martinez said carefully, "I need to verify your credentials and speak with Mr. Kozlov privately before any transfers take place." Thompson's expression hardened. "Lieutenant, this is now a federal matter involving national security. You don't have the authority to delay our operations." Rodriguez had noticed Martinez's hesitation and moved closer, his hand resting casually on his sidearm. Years of partnership had taught him to read her body language, and he could see she was preparing for trouble. Kozlov, despite his wounded condition, had been watching the exchange with growing alarm. "Lieutenant," he said quietly, "that man behind Agent Thompson, I've seen him before. He was in photographs from Colonel Volkov's intelligence files." The tension on the yacht's deck became electric. Martinez realized they might have just escaped one trap only to fall into another. If Kozlov's warnings about government corruption were accurate, then some of these supposed federal agents might actually be hostile operatives with official credentials. "Agent Thompson," Martinez said firmly, "I'm going to need to see documentation for every person on this yacht, and I'm going to need independent verification of your authority from Coast Guard Command." Thompson's facade of professional courtesy evaporated. "Lieutenant Martinez, you're interfering with a critical national security operation. Stand down immediately." But Martinez had made her decision. 8 years of Coast Guard service had taught her to trust her instincts, and every instinct she had was screaming that something was terribly wrong. "Chief Rodriguez, secure Mr. Kozlov. Nobody moves him without direct orders from Coast Guard Command." The standoff lasted only seconds before Thompson made a subtle gesture to her team. But Rodriguez had spent 20 years in situations where split-second decisions meant the difference between life and death. His weapon was drawn before Thompson's supposed agents could react. "Everyone stay calm," Rodriguez announced loudly. "Lieutenant, I think we need to have a longer conversation with our Russian friend here." In the confusion that followed, Kozlov managed to pull Martinez aside. "Lieutenant, listen carefully. The Svetlana is scheduled to dock at berth 97 in Long Beach at 11 tonight. The cargo will be transferred to Warehouse Complex 7 on Terminal Island, but there's a backup plan." "What kind of backup plan?" "If the primary shipment is intercepted, there's a second container on another ship, the Pacific Dream, arriving in San Francisco the following morning." Colonel Volkov always believed in redundancy. Martinez felt the weight of the moment pressing down on her. She was a Coast Guard officer, trained for maritime law enforcement and rescue operations, not international espionage and nuclear terrorism. But somehow the responsibility for preventing a catastrophic attack on American soil had fallen to her and her small crew. The sound of additional aircraft approaching made everyone look up. This time it was clearly military, sleek helicopters with marine markings, followed by what looked like Navy vessels on the horizon. Kozlov smiled weakly. "Lieutenant, it seems your government takes nuclear threats seriously when they receive proper verification." Agent Thompson's expression had changed from authority to barely concealed panic. "This is highly irregular," she protested. "Our operation has full federal authorization." But Martinez was no longer listening to Thompson. Her radio crackled with a new voice, one carrying the unmistakable authority of genuine federal command. "Lieutenant Martinez, this is Admiral Richardson, Pacific Fleet Command. We have confirmed intelligence regarding the nuclear threat you've uncovered. Maintain custody of the defector and prepare for immediate transport to a secure facility." As genuine federal agents secured the yacht and arrested Thompson's team, Martinez realized how close they had come to disaster. Not just the potential nuclear attack, but the near miss of turning Kozlov over to the very people who wanted to silence him. 6 hours later, as the sun set over the Pacific, Martinez stood in a secure briefing room at Naval Base Coronado. The Svetlana had been intercepted by Navy vessels and boarded by Marine teams. The agricultural equipment had indeed contained enough enriched uranium for 3 dirty bombs, exactly as Kozlov had warned. The warehouse in Long Beach had been raided simultaneously, revealing a sophisticated smuggling operation that had been moving dangerous materials through American ports for months. Most importantly, the investigation had exposed a network of corrupted officials who had been facilitating the operation from within the government itself. Admiral Richardson entered the briefing room, accompanied by genuine FBI and Homeland Security officials. "Lieutenant Martinez, Chief Rodriguez, I want to personally thank you for your actions today. Your decision to trust your instincts and protect Mr. Kozlov probably saved thousands of lives." Rodriguez grinned. "Just another day in the Coast Guard, Admiral." But Martinez knew better. As she looked out at the ocean where their morning patrol had begun, she realized some days change everything. Sometimes a routine safety inspection becomes the first line of defense against unthinkable threats. And sometimes, when someone tells you their name and everyone steps back, it's because that name carries the weight of secrets that could reshape the world. Viktor Kozlov had chosen the most dangerous possible way to defect, but in doing so, he had prevented a nuclear catastrophe that would have devastated the West Coast. The Russian arms dealer who had caused so much fear with his reputation had ultimately become an unlikely hero, protected by Coast Guard officers who chose to trust their instincts over official credentials. As Martinez prepared her report on the day's events, she reflected on how quickly ordinary people could find themselves at the center of extraordinary circumstances. The morning had started with routine patrol duties and ended with preventing nuclear terrorism. She realized that sometimes the most important battles aren't fought by special forces or intelligence agencies, but by ordinary service members who refuse to look the other way when something doesn't feel right. The Pacific Dream, the backup vessel Kozlov had warned about, was intercepted the next morning in San Francisco Bay. Another shipment of nuclear materials was seized, and additional arrests were made. The full scope of the smuggling operation would take months to unravel, but the immediate threat had been neutralized. In the months that followed, Viktor Kozlov would provide intelligence that led to the dismantling of several international criminal organizations and the arrest of corrupt officials in multiple governments. His decision to defect, made at enormous personal risk, had far-reaching consequences that extended well beyond the dramatic encounter on the yacht. For Lieutenant Martinez and Chief Rodriguez, life eventually returned to routine patrols and safety inspections. But they carried with them the knowledge that vigilance and integrity could make the difference between catastrophe and safety, and that sometimes the most important question isn't who someone claims to be, but whether you're brave enough to find out the truth.